The last time we met last week, we left off at the beginning of page Hey. So the paragraph is going to begin as Oisa HaPe'ula. You'll see that on page Hey. So that's on the second sheet inside of the packet. Rav Kook told us over the last couple of weeks that there is a unique identity that the Jewish people has in that we are an Am Hashem, an Am Segula, and that is part of our DNA. That's part of who we are. And the only way that we will succeed as individuals and as a nation, the only way that we will live in the world of Chaim, right? Is that we live with a world of Chiyus in as much as we are connected with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Last week, Rav Kook told us that the day-to-day mundanities of life can often muddy our perception of reality. It makes it difficult for us to experience that relationship with Hashem because doing the garbage and taking the dog for a walk and filling out paperwork, those are the things that do not inspire a Jewish soul. They don't turn us on, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts into our weekly existence this institution, this union called Shabbos. Shabbos Kodesh is that opportunity that a Jew can re-engage with that deeper part of who we are, the more real and more true part of who we are, and thereby connect to our HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We spoke about the different areas and levels of Shabbos. Shabbos being a menucha on the one hand, meaning a cessation of labor, like we noted from the Sfasamis last week, that Vayichulu Hashamayim Ba'aretz, that's the end of work, the end of labor, the beginning of rest. And then there is another madrega of Shabbos, another level, another layer of Shabbos, and that is Beini Uvein B'nei Yisrael Oisi La'olam. It is part and parcel of our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what we described last week. And then we ended off by saying that which Shabbos achieves for the individual, Shmita achieves on a national level. And to that end, at the top of page Hey, in the stapled packet, you will see, says Rav Kook as follows. As Oisa Pe'ula Shabbos Pa'elas al Kol Yochid Pa'elas Hi Shmita al Ha'uma Bichlala. That which Shabbos achieves for the individual, Shmita achieves for the nation. And now let's define and explain and elucidate what that means. First and foremost, just a tiny snapshot of Hilchos Shmita. That's important to understand. Rav Kook is expecting that we understand a snapshot of Hilchos Shmita in order to understand the next paragraph. The same way that he expects us to understand a little bit of Hilchos Shabbos to understand the previous one. But Shabbos is something that we're probably more familiar with than Hilchos Shmita. Nevertheless, says Rav Kook, let's talk about Shmita. Very, very simply, every 7 years there is a Shmita. Like every 7 days there is a Shabbos. The last year of the Shmita cycle, the 7th year of the Shmita cycle, is Shmita. Halachas of the Shmita year are that a farmer cannot plow, plant, or reap anything from their land, right? You're not allowed to do any pu'ulos that will make the ground grow or that will make trees grow, which is you're not allowed to prune your trees. Pruning trees is the equivalent of planting seeds because that's what makes the fruit grow. Those are the Gemara explained that there are four malachas mid'oraisa with regards to Shemitah, right? And the Gemara also explains that as opposed to Shabbos, which has avos and toldos, Shemitah only has avos. There are no toldos. All of the toldos are only midrabanan when it comes to the world of Shemitah. Practically speaking, if I'm a farmer, so whatever I have in my silo, I can eat. Can I plant any of those seeds? No. Right? Meaning I have a whole stack of grain, I can eat my grain. That's besed. That I'm allowed to do. What about the things that grow naturally in the field? Can I harvest that? Well, sort of. Right? I can harvest that in as much as so can everyone else. Right. Meaning I can go and I can take as much as I need for a certain period of time. Right? For no commercial usage, and any usage needs to be equivalent between me, the owner, and any other person or animal that wants to take this stuff, right? Bisman Hazeh, there are enormous and far-reaching implications of this din. Important machlokes in the Rishonim and the Achronim. At what point in time one violates that issue? Yeah. So not actively feeding the poor, but your field is open to the poor. Your field belongs, you have an apple orchard, your apples belong to you as much as it belongs to them.
You don't have to leave anything for the poor.
No, Meaning, you don't have that din. The regular obligation of like payah or trumas and you don't have during Shemitah. You're not harvesting, right? You don't have a annual yield on this year, so
you're at the same level as anybody else.
everybody else.
They're
So
not yours.
correct. So there's an important din to understand halacha l'maisa. Just this comes up halacha l'maisa in Eretz Yisrael this year is. If you lock your field, you lock the field and don't let people in, that is probably a violation of an Issa Daraisa. But you also don't want people to like camp out in your field and destroy it. So you have to let them in, but you don't have to let them destroy your field. And that's important to point out. There's a lot of important discussions in the Poskim Bisman Hazeh, how to ensure that your field is secure without being in violation of Shemitah, because right, yeah. So for example, this is important to understand. Who does the land belong to during Shemitah? So it belongs to the Ribono Shel Olam as much as all land always belongs to the Ribono Shel Olam, but it's still your land. As to the perus, the yield of the land, whatever grows naturally, that belongs to Klal Yisrael, the world, through HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Which means that if somebody decides to, pitch a tent and camp in your field, can you kick them out? Yes, absolutely. If he says, no, I'm here for an apple, can you kick him out? No. That's important to understand. Which means that you are exactly the same as everyone else with regards to the fruit of your field. Many Israeli farmers, Bisman Hazeh, will close the gates of their field so that you don't end up with people marauding through and destroying the trees, right? You don't want that to be destroyed. But they'll lock the fence, they'll lock the gate of their field, and then they'll put a big sign up saying, the keys are by the balabas at this address, and this is the phone number. If you want fruit, come and get. Come on, I'll open for you, but Simcha Rabbah, I'm just locking it to make sure that nobody destroys the field or the trees, but not to prevent anybody from taking fruit. Yeah.
Can you restrict the Arab from coming in?
So yes, for security purposes, yes, absolutely. But practically speaking, you don't ask for ID when people come to your field. Whoever wants to come and take, comes and takes, whether they be rich or poor, right? I don't know if basically Jeff Bezos decides to land his rocket outside your field and come get your fruit. You right. I'm saying so. You don't. Although you are not obligated to allow him to land the rocket in your field. That'll mess up your field, right? That's the nafkamina, right? If this is practical for anybody, right? Or if any of you guys are planning on taking a rocket to Eretz Yisrael, in all likelihood, they'll still make you fill out COVID paperwork, whatever. So the din is as follows: that everybody gets to eat from your field. That's an important, essential caveat to understand. You don't plant, you don't reap, you don't sow, but you don't have to let it get destroyed. That's basic premise. Says Rav Kook, the second line here, Tzorich miyuchad hu le'uma zu. Shemitah is a unique need for the Jewish people. We need Shemitah. We need Shemitah on a national level, the same way that we need Shabbos on a personal level, in order to amplify, to bring out, to express, and to experience the basic nature of who we are. Without Shemitah, we lack national identity as pertains to the highest level of ourselves. And to that end, Rav Kook explains, because our existence as being a created entity of Hashem, the Am Hashem, is nitiyah b'kirba, planted inside of us ba'ofen boilet v'nitzchi, in a way that is sticking out and eternal. You can't get rid of that aspect of the Jewish people. Ki mizman lizman yisgale b'seicha ha'ma'or ha'eloki shela b'chol malay zaharai. It needs to be that from time to time, the basic essence of the Jewish people is expressed externally and not just in latent potential. It needs to come out. It needs to be expressed. Asher lo yashbitu chaye hachevra shel chol im ha'amal v'hadaiga v'ha'za'af v'atacharus asher lahem, that it not be dulled. It shouldn't be squashed. It shouldn't be muddied by the general day-to-day life of mundane activities, Im ha'amal, with the toil, v'hadaga, and the anxiety, v'hazaf, and the rage, v'atacharus, and the competition, and that's an important word, asher lahem, that belongs in the common sphere. The Rishus Harabim is a place of anxiety and worry and anger and competition. We need to pause that from time to time. Leman loy tuchal leiskalos b'kirba pnima taras nishmasa. Sorry. Leman tuchal leiskalos b'kirba pnima taras nishmasa bichlalusa k'may shehi. So that the soul of the Jewish people can be expressed. That which is internal can be expressed externally, which is the taharas nishmasa, the purity of the meta-Jewish soul as it is. That's what the pause that Shemitah gives us is for us to experience being Jewish as a whole. Yeah.
At least from this point, it's like a Pella that he was matir.
We'll get there. Correct. We'll get there. Don't worry. Right? So what's pshat that he was
Like the best argument in that.
correct. So we'll get there. We'll get there. Don't worry. I mean, he's explaining to you his understanding of Shemitah Bichlal. And then to get into the Pirtei Pratim, this is the world of Rav Kook in general. Rav Kook looks at everything b'skira achas, b'mabat klali, looking at everything. And then, okay, once you have an understanding of everything, how do we apply that everything here? Now, says Rav Kook, v'im oisa ha'abiriyus, Hamuchrachas lihis lavos im kol seder shel chayei tzibur kvuim. The abirius means power, strength, right? Abir, right? Abir Yaakov, the strength of Yaakov. So, v'im oisa ha'abirius, with the power, with the strength. That's muchrachas lislavos imkol seder shel chayei tzibur kvuim. That comes part and parcel of day-to-day communal life. Geremes lahaktin es adinus hachayim hamusaris. What that does is it dulls the sensitivity, the beauty, the purity of the moral, ethical Jewish soul. We'll explain what that means in one moment. He says, "V'hanigud hamasmid shebein hashmiya haidealis lahachraza shel chesed ve'emes," and the constant tension between the ideal of Yiddishkeit against, which is chesed and emes, and chemla and rachamim, right? Truth and kindness and compassion and mercy. Levein hanigisha v'hakviya v'alachatz hakbada shel kinyan u'ruchush, which is pitted against the day-to-day activities of marketplace competition, right? The dog-eat-dog world, capitalism, right? The market. So there is a tension between these things. That a Jew, by definition, wants to live in a world of, emes v'shalom ehavu. You want to live in a world of peace and tranquility and mutual cooperation and respect. And then, either I'm going to get the contract or you're going to get the contract. So then what? What happened to the world? So the Torah never tells you, just roll over and let somebody else steamroll your business. The Torah tells you go and work, right? I'm saying, but two people that are legitimate competitors, your obligation is to compete. That's your obligation, is to compete in the marketplace and to be successful. That's your chiyuv. That's what you're supposed to do. But at the end of the day, there's a certain geschmack in like beating your competitor. There's a geschmack. There's supposed to be, right? If you didn't have a geschmack in like getting the deal, winning the contract, your bid or that your proposition that was the one that was submitted and won the day. Okay. If you don't feel geschmack in that, you're not going to do it. So you do feel the geschmack. Everybody feels the geschmack. That's part of it.
As long as you're making money, you get schmack.
Correct. But when I'm making money, someone else isn't. That's that's what it means. Now, that doesn't have to be what it means. But in each isolated incident, say what?
It's not a next
Yeah, correct. It's not a zero-sum game, right? Meaning, it's not that when I win, someone else has to lose, but in each interaction, it feels that way. It certainly feels that way, right? Like,
Rabbi, I
yeah.
understand something. The fields weren't working, but the accountants and the lawyers and the contractors, they were still working.
No.
So, on Shmita, right?
So we'll get to the halachas of Shemitah. We're talking about, the Torah is speaking about an exclusively agrarian society.
It has to be exclusively.
Correct.
But it was never exclusively agrarian.
So it was never, Eretz Yisrael was never an exclusively agrarian society. You are allowed to trade. You are allowed to trade in minimal ways, but not with the yield of Shemitah. Right? Meaning, if you happen to trade currency, you can still trade currency during Shemitah.
People would be just like every other year, you know. They'd be
Yes, but most of Klal Yisrael are farmers. Yes, I'm saying the description that the Torah gives is of a nation of farmers. Yeah, I mean, more or less everybody has a portion of land from which they derive their parnasa. Right. Meaning,
Nobody's, if his implicit question is, but the farmers are losing
and everybody else is making. Yeah. Yes. Correct. No, 100%. We're talking about an agrarian society here. So he says as follows. He says you have the existential tension between the Jew that wants to be a Bal Chesed, that wants to be a Rachman, that wants to be like the sweetest, kindest, nicest person in the world, that also needs to make a living. So he's a cutthroat businessman. That's how you make a living, as much as you can as a mensch. This is a tension. This is a tension that exists in the world of business. You have two emotions that are competing with each other. So he says, when this happens repeatedly, you see this happening to people over a particular career with a particular trajectory, is they become more hardened people. They become more cynical people. They become less patient, less kind. It has an effect. What a person does with a day-to-day life has an effect on what they become. It transforms the individual. You have somebody that spends their whole life, making cutthroat deals. It turns them into somebody that, it's a less gentle person. Doesn't necessarily have to. But that means a life of work of making sure that it doesn't.
Not on Shabbos.
So Shabbos, you take a day off, right? That's a Baruch Hashem and that's for the individual. The individual has Shabbos. What of a nation? A nation, right? Says Rav Kook, the longer that society continues with an understanding that everybody is going to do the best that they can by engaging in competition as much as possible to win. That's the goal, is to win. And that is overall what's good for the economy, right? That's like modern capitalist theory, is that everybody is competing with each other, and that is what is best for the economy overall. Everybody is competing in a fair market. He says, but what that does is, yes, the economy will grow, and the nation will become less gentle. It'll be a crueler place to live. To that end, says Rav Kook, the lachatz and the hakbada shel kinyan u'rechush, the pressure and the pushing. Everybody has to be makbid on each other. They have to, that line of the contract means that that I'm right and you're wrong. So kinyan u'rechush, of buying and selling, he says that has to happen in the world of business. He says, it drives a wedge between us and our grander ideals. That's what it does. It makes us less godly people, right? It makes us less godly. If the tchunas hanefesh of Klal Yisrael is to be mahu rachum af atah hayeh rachum mahu chanun af atah hayeh chanun, to be kind and to be gentle and to be compassionate and to be merciful and to be sweet, idealistic people. So, an environment of capitalism, of fighting with each other, so, okay. And then people, at a certain point in time, sit down and look at their lives and go, I've turned into a bit of a jerk. I've been living this way for such a long time. And societies can do that as a whole. The longer that it happens without pausing to reflect, to look back and say, is this right or is this wrong? So that can negatively impact on a society. Therefore, says Rav Kook, this worms its way in like a slow acting venom into the moralities of the individuals. He says, 4 lines from the bottom, the pause of this normative way of engagement, with predictable breaks. Everybody knows when the pause comes. Mitkufa lekufa, from time to time, brings to this people, when they are established as is appropriate, it will uplift the nation to what we need to be. There is this constant tension between growing the economy and growing the soul of the people, and that requires a give and a take. Sometimes we are engaged, 6 out of 7 years, we're engaged in growing the economy, of developing the society on a practical, down-to-earth, literally down-to-earth level. And 1 out of every 7 years, we pause so that doesn't become the defining characteristic of our nation, blocking that which is really who we want to be. Am Segula, Orla Hashem, Mamlechas Kohanim, Goy Kodosh, all of these lofty ideals and ideas, that doesn't get lost in the eternal, perpetual rat race of generations. Now, Rav Kook already hints here, since you asked the question, this is like the greatest testament to why you should not have a heter mechira and take any shortcuts. So he already a little bit hints here that this is only going to work and operate if the nation is kshehi misuderes al mechoina, when everything else is operating appropriately. If everything else is not operating appropriately, then this might not have its intended aims. And he'll talk about that developing both hashkafically and halachically a little bit later. He says as follows. Last 4 words of the page, he says, as a result of that which is godly within us, that which is greater than all social order. It operates on it operates on that nature of who we are, acts on, operates on, and elevates all of the avenues of our day-to-day life and gives it a sense of completion. Now, there are those that accused Rav Kook within this, in later generations, of being a socialist. And we'll talk about that in a second, yeah.
On the previous page,
It means the social order. Yes, meaning it's going to be ma'aleh, that social order, because you take a break to figure out and hone the same thing that Shabbos does, right? Shabbos is a break from the week that elevates the week, right? It is a point of coalescence, yeah.
The Torah is out of its way to say that Shmita will have neither a positive nor a negative
Yes.
effect on the farmer's existence.
Maybe. We'll talk about that.
It's going to grow enough in the 6th year to cover going to 8.
So maybe we'll talk about that. You're 100% right, but that's the second rendition of Shemitah. It's a Mefurish Sfarno there. I'll show that to you next week. Yeah. Yes. It's not the same as intentions. Yes. Yeah. We're going to talk about how Shemitah plays out in two Madrigas as Shem next week. But this thinking that Rav Kook is explaining here of a world of 6 years of competition and a year off from competition. So there are those that accuse Rav Kook of aligning himself with socialist fundamental ideals, that the best world is the world where there is no competition. What'd you say? Right, where there's no competition, that meaning the socialist idea of, but we should also point out that the state of Israel was founded by socialists, by hardcore socialists, ad kedei kach, that one of the candidates for the flag of Israel did not have 1 star, but had 7 stars. Why would it have 7 stars? Ah, you wish. 7 stars. Stars. Kochavim. You wish 7 days of the week. That would already be a little bit Torah-based. Nah. Yeah, you already... Yeah, you wish. No, the 7 hours in the socialist work day. That was right. They were Chazak socialists. So there were those that accused Rav Kook of aligning to that socialist ideology of labor, right? The Labor Party in Israel. That's where it comes from. It's not time for history, but what I want to show you is that this thinking of Rav Kook, by the way, comes glatt from Rabbi Nachman in Likutei Moharan in Ois Yud Daled, where he speaks in Torah Yud Daled and Ois Yud Beis, where he speaks about Hanukkah. We don't have a tremendous amount of time. I'll show you just the Nakuda. Everybody here knows, Medina de Gemara, we just had Hanukkah, Medina de Gemara, your candles have to burn until when? What's the shear? Ad shetichle regel min hashuk. Until everybody has left the shuk, the marketplace. Ad shetichle regel min hashuk, until people have left the marketplace. Zog Rav Nachman, take a look in Likutei Moharan, Ozi Beis, where I put a little arrow there. It's a little bit too small. I apologize. This was the only way to get it on one sheet. He says, this was the copy that has it on one sheet. He says as follows. I'll just read it out. He says, "Va'azai kasher zeichen l'shalom haklali," when there will be peace completely, right? When there will be this is the loose leaf over here. It says when there will be peace completely. Azai yisbatel kol hamasa umatan min ha'olam. Commerce will cease to exist. There will be a time, in some point in time in the future of the world, that people will be able to operate on collaboration alone without competition. And let's explain what this means for a second. Is if you're a farmer, most of your life is spent growing and developing things, right? That's what you do with most of your life. The worst part of your day is when you then have to take what you've yielded, bring it to market, and then have it appraised by somebody so that you can then live, right? What if everybody could spend their time just growing and developing, and there would be enough of all of that for people not have to compete in the market? Everybody would just have more than enough of everything. Zog Rav Nachman, that is the highest ideal of Shalom one day. That one day there will be a time where competition will give way to collaboration, and at that point in time, there will no longer be masa umatan, there will no longer be a shuk. It says, there will be no longer any competition, there will be no longer any marketplace. He says, at the root of all business competitive strategy, at the root of the rat race, is a lack of shalom. Why? He says, indicative of every business deal is that the buyer and the seller want different things. They don't want the same thing. The key ratzon of both of these people is not aligned. I want something that you have, you want something that I have. He says, this one wants to buy and that one wants to sell. Says, if they would both want exactly the same thing, you can't do business with somebody that has what you want and wants what you want. Right? You can't do business with them. Right. The same thing. If you would be exactly the same aligned with what you have and what you want, two people that have the same thing and want the same thing, correct. There you go. Doesn't happen. He says, all the business is rooted in machlokes. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily that all machlokes is bad machlokes. We have a concept called machlokes l'shem shamayim. Machlokes l'shem shamayim. That's a good thing. Machlokes l'shem shamayim is positive.
That's only good when you're learning Torah.
Nope. Machlokes l'shem shamayim. The Zohar HaKadosh says, what was the first machlokes l'shem shamayim? Nah, that's like a couple thousand years later. Nah, that was the machlokes shalol l'shem shamayim. The first machlokes l'shem shamayim was? Nah. Nope. Chavra. This is quoted by the Ksav v'Kabbalah in Parshas Bereshis that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world on day 1. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu on day 2 separates the waters. No, before, that's day 4. Day 2, HaKadosh Baruch Hu separates between the waters, Mavdil, Bein Mayim Asher L'Arkev, Bein Mayim, right? The Mayim Elyonim and the Mayim Tachtonim. That is the first machlokes. The very first machlokes. Why on day 2? There's no kitov because there's machlokes. It's not good. Day 3 comes along and it's Pamayim kitov. Hashem says it's good twice. Why? Because says the Zohar HaKadosh, that machlokes was l'shem shamayim. Literally, was to create the shamayim. L'shem shamayim. It's a Zohar. This is not Blumenthal coming up with homilies. There's a lot to speak about on that. Not for now. There's a machlokes l'shem shamayim. There is a concept of machlokes l'shem shamayim, but the ultimate is the shalom that comes after that. Says Rav Nachman, Hadlakas Neres Chanukah is Ad Shetichle Regel Min HaShuk means that Chanukah is okay, Baruch Hashem. That machlokes l'shem that the machlokes l'shem shamayim, that ultimately it gets to that place of l'shem shamayim where there is no longer a machlokes, where there is ha'emes ve'ashalom me'avu. That Chevra, that is merumas in Ner Chanukah, which is supposed to be the candle that burns Ad Shetichle Regel Min HaShuk until everybody leaves the market. Ad Shetichle Regel Min HaShuk. That's the end of competition, right? There's a lot more to it. This is Osyud Beis in a very long Torah. But this is what Rav Kook is talking about, is that every 7 years there is a pause where Klal Yisrael is going to experience a stop in the world of competition so that we can mitigate the ill effects of continued competition on our national morality and soul. That we don't become hardened, cutthroat, dog-eat-dog competitors. That for 1 year, every 7, we on a national level say, whoa, we have a value system that is beyond competition. Competition is the way to develop a society now. We understand. I'm asking. I wouldn't go even so far as to say that Rav Kook is calling it a necessary evil. He's saying it is necessary. Just like Sheshes Yomim Tavod is necessary. But Shabbos is necessary so that 6 days of work doesn't mess you up.
He wants to compare this to Shabbos.
That's exactly what he's doing.
No, it doesn't.
By the way, take a look at the very next line. It's not Rav Kook's Chiddush.
It's like making Shabbos on Tuesday.
Hold on. He says, Ukashem shenem b'Shabbos b'Reish Shabbos la'Hashem. The same way that it says the Shabbos that comes off the 6 days Shabbos la'Hashem. Kach never b'Shvius. It says the same thing by Shmita. Shabbos la'Hashem. It's also called Shabbos la'Hashem. This is not Rav Kook's Chiddush. This is the Sifra, and it's quoted by Rashi al HaTorah. That this is a Shabbos and this is a Shabbos. Both of them function similarly. You're not makabel.
I don't buy it because it's like if you make Shabbos on Tuesday.
This isn't Shabbos on Tuesday. This is National Shabbos.
Just because you don't work doesn't mean you.
By the way, the din is during Shemitah, not that you don't work. It's that you don't grow the economy. You're allowed to work. A person wants to sit and write svarim and sell svarim, you're allowed to work.
But he doesn't put any credence to the ethical Jewish businessman who does everything for Shem Shemayim.
That's exactly his point, is that yes, it is possible for the individual, on an individual level, to mitigate the ill effects of a capitalist dog-eat-dog society. It is impossible for a nation as a whole to do that without a national reset. That's his point. Yes, you're right that each individual can do that, but that's a yochid. A yochid can figure out how to do that in their day-to-day existence, be a big tzaddik, right? Like the Chafetz Chaim story, racing after the ganef that stole from his shop, saying, "Amoichel you, it belongs to you, you're not a ganef." Yeah, yes, there are people that can do that. In economy, people that will not be affected by capitalist society. There will be tzaddikim tahirim lamala min hateva. Yes, there are those. But that's not most people, and it's not expected of most people. Most people are going to do what they do, and it's correct to do what you do. It's just, if that becomes society, well, then you end up with a group of people that are just really hardened businessmen. Yeah, of course.
As I was expressed before, Shabbos, it's not, everybody has to keep Shabbos, everybody has to keep Shabbos. Otherwise, you're not a religious Jew.
Yes.
Everybody has to keep this. Everybody's not keeping it. I don't mean the land. I mean the whole commerce concept.
Yes.
But it's not.
So again, in an agrarian society, it is.
But it never was totally.
It was never totally, but it was always.
Then certainly not meant for today.
So yes and no, and we'll get to that. We're going to get to that. The practical ramifications for today, we're getting there. Yes, there were very few years that everybody actually kept Shemitah. Right? There were a few. David and Shlomo, they kept Shemitah. Total economy shut down during David and Shlomo, they did. No, I'm saying the economy was the land. That was the basis of the economy. Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. But the Nakuda is like this, is that national reset, this is Rav Kook's essential point, is that the national reset is designed to ensure that commerce doesn't destroy the soul of the nation. That's his chiddush. My dear sweet and holy friends, I will see you guys Hashem Yisbarach next week.